Rai is the strongest vampire of all time who woke up after sleeping for 800 years and decided to go to school, where he enjoyed being surrounded by pretty girls, but things start to change when an evil organization with the name of the Union starts being a menace and Rai is forced to use his godly powers to protect his loved one. Shinwoo and Oniichan are walking to the school, discussing how this is the first time they are excited to go to school. Oniichan advises Shinwoo to take a little rest as his broken arm will make it difficult for him to take notes. However, it isn't a problem as Shinwoo wants Oniichan to take them anyway. As soon as they arrive at school, both of them notice M21, a new guard that the school recently hired. He's quite a badass and all the girls are head over heels for him. The two of them try talking to M21 and at the same time, Frankenstein and Rai look at them from the school building, thinking about how the memory erasure was a success and Jinwoo and Oniichan don't remember anything. This makes Frankenstein remember last night and think about how M21 informed him about the organization called Uni. According to him, it is an organization with an extraordinary knowledge of science, and he is one of their creations. M24 was a close friend of his who was also his partner but was eliminated a few days earlier. M21 further informed them that he was the only one alive amongst the other experiment subjects. Frankenstein then asks M21 about his future plans as he had already betrayed the Union and they are after his life. He then mentions that M21 protected his students and because of that, he will allow M21 to stay with them. Listening to this proposal surprises M21 and he calls Frankenstein awfully trusting. Frankenstein replies that his trust doesn't mean anything and all that matters is his master, Rai's orders. Back in the present, Rai walks towards the classroom where everyone is messing around with Shinwoo and writing on his fracture plaster. Rai notices the images drawn on his plaster and decides to make one himself. He ends up drawing a cute cat which Shinwoo finds annoying. During lunch break, everyone is eating their noodles while Rai is staring at them. Rai lets them know that he is waiting for them to become soggy and multiple in number. After the classes are over, Rai and Oniichan discuss the new game release and want to beat it by the end of the day. Oniichan invites Rai as well and Shinwoo decides to train Rai, considering how much of a newbie he is. Unfortunately, Rai has other plans and Shinwoo remembers that Rai lives with Frankenstein, the school principal. As Rai doesn't have a phone, they think that Frankenstein might get worried about him as they have no way to contact each other. Afterward, Rai goes to the roof and tells Frankenstein about the impressive thing that humans own. Frankenstein, realizing that he is talking about mobiles, promises to buy him one. The next day, Shinwoo and Oniichan are impressed to see Rai with a phone as well, but it turns out he doesn't know how to use it. Luckily, Oniichan, being the nerd, has all the knowledge and teaches Rai everything. Soon after, Frankenstein receives a message from Rai and is happy to receive it until he reads the cringe-looking message. Later that day, M21 is standing on the school grounds when the janitor arrives and comments that M21 must be a good person considering that Frankenstein is the one who brought him here. Suddenly, a sports car arrives at the school and a gorilla comes out of it, questioning students about Shinwoo. M21 is pissed after seeing them but decides not to intervene as he is supposed to stay hidden and keep a low profile. He then notices the gorilla troubling the janitor as well and just when he is about to punch him, Shinwoo arrives and blocks it. The gorilla realizes that Shinwoo is the one who hit on his girl earlier. However, all Shinwoo did was stop the girl from falling and ask the guy to not make such a big deal out of something so small. This pisses the gorilla even more and he manages to land a punch on Shinwoo's face. Just then, Rai arrives and starts staring at M21, indirectly telling him to go and help Shinwoo out. On the other hand, Shinwoo isn't defeated that easily and manages to land a hit on the other guy as well. The janitor tries to stop the fight and the gorilla grabs his collar. Simultaneously, M21 appears at the scene and orders the man to put the janitor down. He puts the janitor down and tries to attack M21 but he forces the gorilla to the ground. M21 then picks him up and throws him at the car nearby, letting him know that he would have surely met his demise if there was nowhere around. Seeing this makes all the delinquents run away, and M21 gets praised by all the school students he saved. Later, M21 remembers how he and the other experiment subjects were born inside a glass tube and had their blood taken all the time. Frankenstein also arrives and apologizes for putting all the work on him even though he is trying to keep a low profile. M21 lets Frankenstein know that he has to fulfill a promise he made to his fallen comrades and requests to let him live at their house till that happens. Frankenstein allows him, letting M21 know that he wanted to do that from the start. Later that night, the DA5 group talks about how their mission is related to investigation and they are supposed to find information related to the failed experiments, which is said to be M21. Shark, one of the DA5 members, comments that investigation is not their stronghold. And their leader, Krantz, comments that all they have to do is follow the Union's orders. At night, Regis and Sarah visit the building where terrorism took place and walk past the guards after using their powers on them. After seeing the condition of the building, They realize that the information has been fabricated, as no mere human can do this kind of damage. In the end, they decide to take care of the matter themselves and get to the bottom of it. The next morning, Shinwoo barely manages to reach school before the gate closes. After him, Regis and Sarah also arrive, and he uses his mind control powers on M21 as well. Regis asks M21 to let them see the person in charge, and he takes them to Frankenstein. Regis uses his mind control powers on Frankenstein as well, and even though it doesn't work, Frankenstein decides to play along for the time being. They ask Frankenstein to enroll them in the school, and he agrees. Later that day, the teacher introduces both of them to the class, and Iken instantly falls in love with Sarah. While everyone looks normal to them, both Sarah and Regis notice the aura around Rai and realize that he is no ordinary human. During lunch break, Shinwoo is responsible for showing them how things work and giving them lunch to eat with the others. While Regis finds it hard to use chopsticks, he takes a look at Rai and is surprised to see how elegantly he does everything. He thinks about the reason Rai is waiting and not eating his meal, and at the same time, Iken is still lost in thought after seeing Sarah. Shinwoo realizes this as well and asks Rai to hang out after school, as they need to mess around with Iken a bit. After Frankenstein is done with his work, he takes a ride back home with M21, who discusses the new students who were enrolled in the class. M21 informs Frankenstein that he felt the same powers coming out of them that he felt from Rai and Frankenstein. He further tells Frankenstein that they might be noblesse, as the Union was looking for them, and he, being the lackey of the Union, wasn't told any information. Frankenstein told M21 that before science and civilization had progressed as they have today, humans used to be powerless and lived in constant fear of animals and nature. Luckily, humans were able to meet beings who called themselves noblesse. They possessed immense powers and surpassed everything humans had seen. Fortunately, noblesse didn't hate the humans and let them be, considering how humans were not worthy of fear or contempt for them. Humans started to show respect and awe for the power they possessed and started to fear them as their leaders. Noblesse thinks of humans as something they need to protect, which is the reason they didn't attack Frankenstein, as they most likely had thought of him as another human. After reaching home, Frankenstein realizes that all the kids have gathered at their house and have created a mess. Even though he is a perfectionist, Frankenstein manages to calm himself down and practice patience. Afterward, Shinwoo proposes letting Regis and Sarah live with Frankenstein, as they don't have anywhere to stay. Shinwoo then asked Rai, and he didn't seem to mind, which didn't give Frankenstein any reason to argue, and accepted it as well. Later, Frankenstein and M21 are doing the dishes, and Sarah asks if she could help, but Frankenstein refuses and she walks away, noticing something before leaving. The next morning, she informed Regis about the tattoo on M21, which is a symbol of things that belong to the Union. This makes them realize that he must be a modified human, and they decide to find it out for sure. After the classes are over, Regis confronts M21 and calls him someone who abandoned humanity to gain power. On the other hand, the boys along with Sarah are walking home when a group of delinquents surround them and force all of them to go to their hideout. At the same time, Regis asks M21 about the mysterious events that occurred last month. M21 realizes that the noblesse is here to investigate and asks Regis the reason he wants to know all of this. Regis replies that he plans to take back what the Union stole from them, that being the coffin. M21 replies that the people who stole the coffin have met their demise, but it is not enough to satisfy Regis, and he starts attacking M21, which results in a full-fledged fight between them. Just then, Sarah tells Regis about their situation, putting a pause to their fight. On the other hand, the delinquents take the group to their leader. Shinwoo asks Iken to protect Sarah and Rai while he deals with them. The first person to attack Shinwoo is put down, which makes all the others even more furious, and they all start attacking him one by one. At the same time, M21 and Regis arrive at the scene. One of the delinquents takes out a gun, and M21 manages to deal with him, saving Shinwoo's life. Seeing how even a more powerful foe has entered the fight, the delinquents decide to run and leave their revenge for some other time. On their way back, Regis comments that humans have become different than they used to be. M21 replies that humans are not the same as in the previous era and don't need the leadership or protection of noblesse. This makes Regis call M21 a modified human, and M21 warns him not to call him that ever again. Regis and M21 are arguing about the content of their noodles and trying to win over each other. Regis tells M21 that he will keep observing him and also uses his mind control to make Frankenstein forget everything he hears. But little does he know that it doesn't work. Regis is sure that mind control works on Frankenstein, but isn't so sure about Rai. He tries using it on him once again, but getting no reaction from Rai makes him unsure. On the other hand, Da5 discusses their current mission and finds out everything that happened at the incident, including M21 and M24. Krantz orders everyone to keep looking for M21 as if he must be alive, considering how no report of his demise has been made. The next day, Iken confronts Shinwoo for getting into fights easily, and he replies that he wouldn't just let his friends get hurt. Afterward, Regis arrives and Iken tries to become his buddy in order to get closer to Sarah. He discusses his height with Regis and reassures him that both of them will one day get taller. Regis replies that height doesn't matter as one should never feel embarrassed by their short height. These legendary words motivate Iken and he praises Regis for being so thoughtful. During break, Regis and Sarah meet up with M21 and Regis lets him know that he doesn't like his presence near him. M21 replies that he is working and is responsible for patrolling the school grounds. Regis doesn't believe him, and M21 lets him know that it is none of his concern. He further mocks Regis by telling him that minors like him should not go outside after hours. At the same time, Frankenstein gives a report to Rai about everything he found out about Regis and Sarah, but he interrupts to let Frankenstein know that the tea is bitter. Later at night, Shinwoo is hanging out with Iken when suddenly, the company Iken works at gets hacked. Luckily, his geek mind allows him to block the hacker, which is Tao in this case. Soon after, a hacking battle between the two starts and both of them start to enjoy the fight until Shinwoo accidentally plugs off Iken's laptop. While Iken informs the company about the hacking attack, Shinwoo talks to the hacker and thinks of him as Iken's secret girlfriend. However, his mind goes blank after realizing that it is a dude and he decides not to judge his nerd friend for liking older men. Later that day, Tao manages to retrieve the information required and lets Da5 members know that M21 was stopped in the surveillance camera footage. After finding out that he is alive, Krantz orders Hammer and Shark to go and apprehend M21 without eliminating him. Back at home, Regis lets M21 know that he doesn't want to live with a modified human and M21 warns him not to call him by that word again. Regis then asks M21 Second's objective and his reason for staying at this place, to which M21 replies that he has to fulfill a promise he made with his late friends. At the same time, Frankenstein arrives and yells at everyone to clean up the mess they made. During cleanup, Regis questions the reason Rai isn't cleaning while everyone else is. Frankenstein starts to panic and tries to dodge the question, but Regis is unable to read the room and keeps on confronting Rai. Eventually, Rai gets up and puts one wrapper in the trash as well. Seeing this makes Frankenstein anxious, asking his master, Rai, for forgiveness. The next day, Frankenstein tells M21 that he opened a fake bank account that Union can't track and has transferred his salary into it. M21 is surprised to receive a salary, and Frankenstein lets him know that he wasn't forcing him to work for him for free. Afterward, M21 thinks about how he, who was once called a failure, is now able to live a normal life and has received his first earnings. At night, M21 is walking back home when he runs into Shark and Hammer. They call him by his codename, making M21 realize that they must be from the Union. Shark lets him know that they are Da5, which makes M21 question why such an elite group would come all this way. Shark asks him to come with them and promises to force him if he decides to resist. Shark then starts making fun of M24, which enrages M21 and he starts attacking them. Hammer waits while Shark takes M21 on, dodging every strike he desperately tries to hit, making him look like a complete idiot. He manages to pin M21 on the ground, but he gets back up after using his Wolverine nails to push Shark back. Shark then takes out his knives and lunges at M21, managing to slash his body up. Luckily, Regis and Sarah arrive at the scene and start questioning the situation. Regis starts insulting Shark, calling him a bore as his hairstyle is as bad as it can get. Furthermore, he mocks Hammer for having that humongous belly, asking him how he isn't ashamed of himself. This makes Shark furious and he attacks Regis, but M21 comes in front of them and tanks the attack. At the same time, Krantz makes an appearance and reminds Shark of his order to not hurt M21 but capture him. He decides to take M21 with them, but Regis tries to stop Krantz from doing so. However, M21, who knows how strong D5 is, asks Regis to butt out and leave the kids alone as he will follow their orders and quietly go with them. After they leave, Regis is even more frustrated at M21, talking about what happened to his so-called promise to his old comrades. Iken tries to go against Tao again and he answers back. This time, they both can challenge each other without any distractions, and Tao manages to find all the information there is about Iken. Back at their home, Frankenstein is glad to have such a peaceful time with his master until Regis and Sarah return. Seeing how frustrated Regis looks makes Frankenstein question his behavior, and Sarah informs Frankenstein that he appears to be sulking a bit. Regis replies that he will never sulk over the likes of M21 and walks away. After he leaves, Sarah informs Frankenstein that the two of them encountered some men who were most likely M21 Second's friends. They talked about staying because of some mission, which made Frankenstein think that M21 was an enemy from the start and only lived with them to dig for information. The next day, Shark wakes M21 up by pouring water on him, and Krantz starts questioning him right away. M21 asks Krantz the reason why such an elite squad is questioning a mere trash like him. This results in Shark kicking M21's chest and letting him know that his only job is to answer their question. M21 realizes that Da5 is not aware of him betraying the Union and thinks that he is on a special kind of mission. He thinks of this as a perfect way to dig some information and plans to go along for the time being. Afterward, Takeo gives M21 some water as he doesn't like a fellow agent being treated this way. However, M21 realizes that the water is mixed with truth serum and lets them know that he won't be giving up that easily. M21 tells Da5 that he is willing to give them the information if they help him retrieve some information of his own. The information he needs is about the other experimental subjects who were with him but sadly lost their lives. M21 asks Tao to dig up the information for him, and he ends up agreeing. M21 tries to test his luck even further and tells Da5 that he is currently hungry and would like to eat before telling them anything. Later that day, Tao talks to Takeo about how he is different from the other members, which makes him wonder how someone like him ended up on the team. Takeo lets him know that the only reason he appears normal is thanks to his little sister. The next day, Iken mentions how they have not seen M21 lately and asks Regis about it, but he refuses to answer his question. Shinwoo then proposes to visit Frankenstein's apartment later to have some fun, and Regis agrees. After school, Shinwoo and Sarah are walking back home after shopping when they come across a foreigner getting harassed by some thugs. On the other hand, Iken finally meets Tao face to face. Tao tells Iken that the reason he kept on hacking into the server was so he could have a fun battle with him once again. Shinwoo manages to beat all the thugs up and saves the foreigner, who turns out to be Takeo. He shows his gratitude to both of them and thinks that the two of them might be on a date. Iken also starts hitting it off with Tao, and they talk about the emptiness nerds like them feel after being ordered around by people. Iken then starts calling Tao boss, as he is a person Iken truly respects due to his skills. Takeo also ends up accompanying Sarah and Shinwoo around the town and talks about her little sister, who might be joining high school soon. Just then, Shinwoo receives a message from Iken, calling him to Frankenstein's house. He apologizes for leaving so quickly and hopes that Takeo can meet up with his little sister soon. Later that day, Tao asks Takeo if he wants him to look for his sister, as he could give it a try. Furthermore, he asks Takeo about how he feels about the Union holding his sister hostage to force him to work. Takeo replies that he doesn't see it as a hassle, as his sister is the only thing he has left in this world. At night, M21 tells Shark that he will give them the information if they manage to find what he needs first. This pisses Shark even more, and he points a knife at M21 but stops after Takeo tells him that the information comes first. Shark gets even more furious at Takeo for interrupting and lets him know that he eliminated all the women and children that Takeo left alive during their missions. This leaves Takeo in shock, and he pulls out his gun at Shark, but Tao manages to stop him. Shark further tells Takeo that he was only following Krantz's orders. The following day, Iken mentions that Frankenstein has called them home for dinner, making Shinwoo think that he must be urging to get revenge for the card game he previously lost. On their way back, Regis notices something and leaves their side, only to arrive face to face with Shark and Hammer. This time, he starts fighting Shark and embarrasses him by using the power of his mind control. The so-called Shark shits his pants after seeing Regis' true powers and decides to take a pill which enhances their overall strength. Now that Shark is stronger, Regis decides to use more of his powers and manages to land some solid attacks on Shark, overpowering him even with the power of a pill. Hammer interrupts and asks Regis to stop fighting if he doesn't want Shinwoo and Iken to get hurt. M21 returns back to the base and finds Regis along with the kids already locked and unconscious. After Regis wakes up, Shark warns him to not make any moves, as even if he manages to break the handcuffs, they still have the kids as hostages. Back at the house, Sarah tells Frankenstein that she and Regis share a faint mental connection and can tell what the other person is going through. At that point, Sarah notices that Regis is either unconscious or has already met his demise. She decides to go and look for him, letting Frankenstein and Rai know that there is nothing to worry about, as she will take care of it. Meanwhile, M21 tries to play dumb and lets Da5 know that he doesn't know Shinwoo or Iken. Shark then tells Krantz that Regis was a match for him even after he used D-Pill, making him think that the kid must have some connection to the missing coffin they are currently investigating. Afterward, Shark tries to pressure M21 into admitting that Regis is his comrade, but he doesn't budge. This makes Regis make fun of Shark for having a fallout with his partner, which results in Shark landing a kick on Regis. Soon after, Shinwoo and Iken also wake up and Shark picks him up, telling him to keep his voice down or he will take his life. Takeo stops Shark from harassing him, and Shinwoo realizes that Takeo is the same person he helped a few days ago. Iken also recognizes Tao as his boss and calls him boss in front of everyone. Hammer and Shark start laughing at Tao for being called boss by a kid. Meanwhile, Sarah is on her way to their hideout, and Rai along with Frankenstein decides to follow her and help the kids out as well. Shinwoo then starts asking M21 about the situation, and he keeps on ignoring them to keep things under control. Shark gets bored and starts kicking Shinwoo to make things interesting. M21 tells Shark that hitting them won't make a difference as he just happened to meet them while working his outside job. Shark then decides to go even further and completely crush Shinwoo, but Tao intervenes. He asks Krantz to let the kids go as they can erase their memories, but Krantz refuses, telling them that he will not be leaving any unknown factors behind. At this point, Shark has enough and tries to go for the elimination, but Regis comes in front of Iken, saving his life. He mocks Shark for being an all-talk no-bark for gaining joy from hurting the weak. On the other hand, the fatty is on his way back to the hideout when he comes across Sarah, who just entered the building. He instantly recognizes her as Regis's buddy and throws a couple of explosives at her, which ends up doing no damage. On the other hand, Shark keeps on beating Regis but stops when Shinwoo lands a punch on his face. Krantz notices the disturbance and asks Takeo to go and handle whatever is going on inside the building. M21 finally tells Da5 that he will give them the information they need if they let the children go away, but Krantz refuses to do so. M21 thinks that he shouldn't be hesitating as he finally has the chance to fulfill his promise to his comrades. However, he can't look at the kids getting beaten to a pulp and decides to make a move, leaving the cleanup for Regis. He slashes Shark's arm, which makes him let go of Shinwoo. On the other hand, Frankenstein and Rai finally arrive at the location and run into Takeo. Frankenstein asks Rai to go ahead and leave the battle to him. With that being said, the battle between Takeo and Frankenstein begins and they seem to be an even match, whereas Hammer arrives to confront Sarah once again. At the same time, M21 starts fighting Shark, but the surprise hit is the only attack he manages to land with his pathetic level of skills. This time, Krantz allows Shark to finish M21 off as he can't bear the humiliation of Da5 any longer. This makes Shark use more power than he previously did and manages to cut M21's chest. Simultaneously, Regis uses his powers to break the handcuffs and punches the crap out of him. Meanwhile, Takeo realizes that the battle is harder than he thought and he ends up taking D pill as well, increasing his overall stats. Furthermore, Shark eats the D pill as well, but Regis still manages to land some solid hits, proving the fact that his transformation doesn't mean anything to him. Just when Regis is about to end Shark, Krantz intervenes, who has also eaten his D pill. Instead of helping Shark out, he starts sucking his life and lets Shark know that he is only following the original plan. He reveals that the D pill is not designed to make the Da5 stronger, but to magnify Krantz's strength exponentially by absorbing the other members of Da5. After sucking Shark's life away, Krantz becomes even stronger and Regis tries to give it his all as well. Surprisingly, Krantz blocks Regis's attacks effortlessly and slams him onto the ground. Nonetheless, Regis still gets back on his feet and attacks Krantz, but as expected, it has no effect on him. This time he punches Regis, making him crash into the ceiling. At this point, Regis is out of the fight and Krantz decides not to eliminate him for now as he wants information regarding the coffin from him. M21 tries to help him out, but his injuries don't allow him to. Just then he notices Rai arriving at the scene with a cold look on his face. Frankenstein can't keep up with Takeo's speed after he takes the D pill. Takeo has put his gun on Frankenstein's head, planning to shoot him and go after Rai. Hearing this makes Frankenstein furious and he lets out all the power he was hiding inside him. On the other hand, Rai takes a look at the situation and Krantz starts asking him questions. Rai tells Krantz that no one gave him permission to speak, followed by him kneeling before Rai. Every Da5 member starts to kneel before Rai and they realize that his powers of mind control are beyond imaginable. Meanwhile, Sarah decides to end the fatty's life for good after taking out her soul weapon. One slash of her soul weapon happens to be enough to end the battle. After breaking the seal of his powers, Frankenstein mentions that he has disobeyed his master and tells Takeo to take responsibility for it. Suddenly, a spike pierces Takeo's body and more of them start to injure him. Frankenstein then rains down a number of spikes at him, planning to end the battle and his life. Takeo realizes that this might be his punishment for involving all the innocent people in his battles. Just then the thought of his sister passes through Takeo's mind and his will to fight returns. He gets even stronger than before and manages to scratch Frankenstein's face. Meanwhile, Krantz somehow manages to get back up and lunges at Rai, but he manages to stop Krantz's attack by only using one hand. Rai then throws him away and he goes crashing into the wall. Seeing how his powers even after absorbing Shark are not working, he asks Tao to give up his life for a greater cause as well. Without hesitation, Tao starts moving towards Krantz, but Iken stops him, asking him not to do that. Tao replies that this is his fate as a modified human and Krantz grabs his face, ready to absorb him. Just then, Iken cries out to Rai, begging him to save Tao's life. On the other hand, Frankenstein manages to restrict Takio's movements and makes several spikes pierce his body at once, finally putting an end to their fight. Simultaneously, Sarah arrives and realizes that Frankenstein is not a normal human either. Frankenstein also notices the soul weapon and realizes that Sarah must be a high-ranking vampire as she has a soul weapon. Takio interrupts their conversation and asks Frankenstein for a favor. He asks them to save Shinwoo as he also saved him in good faith earlier, and tells them to say sorry for this mess. Surprisingly, decides not to end Takio's life and tells him to apologize to Shinwoo in person. Listening to Iken's words makes Tao think for himself, and he manages to get away from Krantz. He tells Krantz that he has decided to live as he can't let him hurt the kids. However, Krantz manages to grab him once again, but this time, Rai helps him out and tells Iken and Shinwoo that there is no need for begging between them, making them tear up. Eventually, Rai decides to end the battle and uses an ability called Blood Field, which swallows up Krantz as a whole, leaving no trace behind. The following morning, Takio wakes up in a bed, shirtless, and notices another man lying shirtless next to him as well. It happens to be M21 who lets Takio know that they are present at the place he lives in. While Frankenstein gives Rai a report of everything that happened, he starts coughing blood, making Frankenstein realize that Rai has not fully recovered and used more power than his body can currently handle. Rai then reminds him of how he broke the seal of his powers without permission. Frankenstein lets Rai know that he is ready to accept any kind of punishment, but Rai lets him go, telling Frankenstein that he will never disobey his orders without a compelling reason. At night, all of them including Tao eat dinner, and he praises Sarah for making such tasty meals, resulting in her blushing. Simultaneously, M21 and Takio also arrive, and Frankenstein asks them to enjoy the meal as they can talk about other stuff afterward. M21 also arrives and sits in front of Regis, which results in the two of them fighting each other as usual. After dinner, Rai approaches M21 and lets him know that he isn't weak as he senses great power residing in him. He then takes some of M21's second's blood and uses his ability to awaken his powers. M21 turns into a werewolf for a second, and Rai lets him know that those are his actual powers. Meanwhile, Tao informs Takio about everything that happened and how Krantz absorbed Shark. Tao then plans on hacking into the Union database and making it look like the two of them were eliminated. However, Takio is worried about his sister, and Tao informs him that his sister doesn't really exist. When he tried to look into the Union's database and find his sister, Tao realized that all the information was fake and someone had messed up Takio's memories to make him think that he had a little sister. Afterward, Tao and Takio show their gratitude to Frankenstein for letting them stay and plan to leave as they don't want to be a burden. Before leaving, Tao tells M21 that he tried to dig for information about his comrades but couldn't find anything as all the files related to them had been destroyed. This makes M21 ask Frankenstein to let the two of them stay at his place as well. He understands that he is in no position to make such a request, but seeing fellow agents being used and thrown away doesn't sit right with him. Frankenstein tells M21 to do it if he feels like it, considering how he is a part of this house as well. After recovering from the injuries, Shinwoo and Iken are on their way to school. Shinwoo discusses how he read an entire manga 3 times during recovery. As soon as they enter school, they notice girls flocking over Tao and Takio, who let them know that they will be working at school as well. Soon after, Rai along with Regis and Sarah also arrives and grabs all the girls' attention. Frankenstein is also watching them from afar and remembers how Rai told him that he likes the life he is living right now. In class, Shinwoo contemplates the reason why only muscle-head delinquents are the only ones who flock to him, unlike Rai, who is surrounded by girls. Meanwhile, M21 talks about their new lives with Tao and Takio. They talk about how this normal kind of life is too bright for people like them. During lunchtime, Shinwoo can't get the thought of the world being unfair out of his mind. Iken asks Shinwoo if he wants girls to flock to him as well, and he agrees. Iken then asks him the type of girl he likes and notices that Shinwoo is head over heels for Sarah. With that being said, Iken and Rai decide to help the lonely boy out and make something going between him and Sarah. Later, the three of them are on their way back when they notice Takio along with Tao and M21 being surrounded by girls, which ends up making Shinwoo even more depressed. Afterward, Iken explained the problems Shinwoo is facing to everyone, including Takio, Tao, and M21. They plan to help him out until they hear the word love and try their best to leave as soon as possible. Iken stops Takio and Tao from leaving while Shinwoo grabs M21 so he can't leave. Iken then lets them know that the girl he likes is Sarah, raising the difficulty of the task even higher. Rai also arrives and asks the three of them to help Shinwoo out. They eventually agree, and Tao finds some date plans for Shinwoo, and after the spot is picked, Shinwoo practices asking Sarah on a date with Takio. However, the task is too embarrassing for Takio and he gives up, which reminds Shinwoo how smooth he was the first time they met. This even more embarrassing story makes Takio pissed, making Shinwoo back off. Having no other choice, they go to Frankenstein to ask for his help, and instead of helping the poor kids out, he starts bragging about how popular he used to be during his prime time. At last, Shinwoo asks Regis about Sarah and the things she likes, but surprisingly, he is unaware. He then asks Regis if Sarah has a boyfriend or someone she likes, but Regis is unaware of this as well. M21 mentions that asking Regis is a waste of time, which pisses him off and results in an argument between the two. Eventually, Rai asks Regis to help Shinwoo out, and he respectfully accepts the request. Regis gives Shinwoo the idea of writing Sarah a love letter, and Shinwoo's writing skills make him question his intelligence. All of them start giving horrendous ideas to him, and Shinwoo gives up and throws the letter away. Following that, the class is PE class, and Shinwoo decides to impress Sarah with something he is actually good at. The students decide to go against Tao, Takeo, and M21, and the whole plan is to make Shinwoo look good in front of Sarah. Regis controls the teacher's mind and makes him become the referee. The basketball game begins, and instead of helping Shinwoo out, Regis starts playing his own game and is confronted by M21, who steals the ball from him. However, he doesn't give up either, and the two of them start challenging each other while Shinwoo watches them from afar. M21 manages to score a point, which pisses Regis off, and he manages to score one as well. The ball then goes to Rai, and he flawlessly passes the ball to Shinwoo. But just when he is about to score a point, Takeo arrives and scores a point after stealing the ball, just to later realize that he messed up the plan. After school, Iken apologizes to Shinwoo as their plan didn't work, and Shinwoo lets him know that it was hard for him to be with Sarah in the first place. Just then, Sarah arrives and gives Shinwoo the love letter he wrote and throws it away. Apparently, Rai had given it to Sarah, and she tells Shinwoo that developing romantic feelings is completely normal, but using others to deliver that message is not. According to her, people are most charming when they are their true selves. Shinwoo agrees and realizes that he shouldn't stress over stuff like that. With that being said, Iken along with Sarah and Shinwoo head over to Frankenstein's place and are surprised by the serious atmosphere. They let Shinwoo and Iken know that their memories will be changed and they will forget all the kidnappings and things that happened with Da5. Shinwoo starts to argue, but Regis and M21 inform him that the information they have is dangerous, and the Union tries their best to remove any and every witness involving the witness's family. They plan to ensure their safety by rewriting their memories so they can live a normal life. Rai lets them know that only the scary stuff will be removed, and they will still remember the friendship and relationship they have with the others. They eventually agree, and Rai rewrites their memories. The next morning, the two of them go to school and still remember each and every one of them. Shinwoo and Iken are on their way to the next class when Regis and Sarah notice something and plan to join the class later. Meanwhile, an old dude arrives at the school, and M21 informs him that entry without permission is prohibited. A powerful aura starts surrounding him, but just then, Regis and Sarah arrive. They greet the old man, Jejital, as their clan leader, which surprises all of them. Jejital asks Regis the reason why modified humans like them three are wandering around the school, but before they can answer, Frankenstein arrives and recognizes Jejital. In Lucadonia, the nobles' country, the clan leaders inform the Lord of Nobles about Jejital's departure and about how Regis and Sarah encountered the person who was inside the coffin, Rai. They talk about how Rai is their enemy and the one who betrayed them. After the meeting, Rajak asks Carrie as the reason he is defending Regis and Sarah, to which he replies that it is not unusual for kids to forget to do their homework. He further advises him to not let his personal emotions take over, as it is their duty as clan leaders to serve the Lord, and apprehending the traitor is their first priority. At the same time, Rail, who is Rajak's younger brother, arrives and asks about the situation, but Rajak leaves without telling him. Carius tries to reassure him that his elder brother is just busy, but Rail tells him to not treat him like a kid and walks away. On the other hand, Jejital asks Frankenstein the reason Regis and Sarah are living among the humans, and Frankenstein replies that they are living in the house he owns. Afterward, Jejital has a meeting with Rai and informs him that Jejital was sent to investigate the coffin. He further informs Rai that there have been great changes in Lucadonia while he was in his slumber, which lasted 800 years. Apparently, it all started when the previous lord met his demise and his daughter, Raskrea, took over as the new lord. Now, Raskrea is searching for Rai, the traitor who drove her father to his demise. Frankenstein tries to deny the accusation, but Rai stops him and lets Jejital continue. They also find that Sarah is one of the clan leaders, considering how she possesses a soul weapon that is carried around by clan leaders only. At last, Jejital informs Rai that he needs to head over to Lucadonia if he wishes to defend his innocence. But Rai refuses, saying that he likes the life he is currently living. Meanwhile, Rai informs Tao and the others about clan leaders and how it is a title bestowed upon only the 13 household heads. Furthermore, they find out that Jejital is Regis's grandfather and start discussing how their hair matches. The discussion takes a weird turn when they start making fun of Regis' cringe hairstyle. Getting back to the topic, They all are curious how Jejital is connected to Frankenstein, and Sarah adds that he is even more of a mysterious man than Rai himself. Back at the house, Jejital lets Frankenstein know that he doesn't trust him, considering how he is the madman who slaughtered many of the nobles a long time ago. This statement reminds Frankenstein of his old days when he used to capture the nobles and use them for his experiment. He then shows nobles the power he possesses, leaving them in a shocked state. At that time, Rai also paid the previous lord a visit, who offered to give Rai a living space at the palace, but he refused and returned to his own mansion. After he leaves, Jejital informs the lord about a man who possesses great powers and has been targeting the nobles' night team. This makes Lord curious and he wishes to meet him, ordering Rajak and Jejital to bring Frankenstein back alive. That night, Frankenstein infiltrates Lucadonia and eliminates a bunch of nobles until Rajak and Jejital arrive at the scene. Frankenstein is glad to see two leaders greet him and find out that their plan is to take him to their lord. Rajak decides to face Frankenstein on his own and asks Jejital to stay behind, and with that being said, their battle commences. After exchanging some blows with Frankenstein, Rajak realizes that it will be hard to capture Frankenstein alive and takes out his soul weapon to make things easier. Little does he know that Frankenstein has something up his sleeve as well, and he calls his secret weapon, named Dark Spear. Jejital doesn't understand how a mere human is able to have such powers. The fight then continues and Frankenstein informs them that their kind can control human blood. Some of the nobles had been using humans for their benefit and discarded them afterward. Frankenstein plans to discard those nobles and prove that humans aren't as weak as they think. During their battle, Frankenstein's power starts taking over his body and he begins losing control. Jejital calls his soul weapon to handle the situation, but Frankenstein's power results in an explosion, allowing him to run away. He gets away and enters Rai's mansion by accident. Frankenstein wears Rai's clothes and wanders around the mansion, thinking how Dark Spear is still more than he can handle. After wandering around for a while, Frankenstein comes face to face with Rai. After running into Rai, Frankenstein tells him that he is the new servant who is going to work at the house, not knowing that Rai lives alone. At the same time, Rajak and Jejital arrive and explain everything to Rai, asking his permission to collect Frankenstein. After seeing the wound of Frankenstein, Rai tells Jejital that the man belongs to him as he works at the mansion. Rai manages to keep a straight face while telling such a lie. Both Rajak and Jejital decide to leave, planning to explain the situation to the Lord. 5 years have passed since that day and Frankenstein has become friends with some of the nobles. He is sparring with Rajak to improve his skills, but his ability ends up taking over him and forces Frankenstein to stop the battle. Jejital visits Rai and informs him that he is still not in favor of sheltering someone like Frankenstein. Additionally, he tells Rai that many of the nobles are starting to disagree with Rai's decision as well. After hearing everything Jejital has to say, Rai apologizes for all the problems Frankenstein has caused and promises to make him have an audience with the Lord. At night, Frankenstein asks Rai the reason he stays in his mansion and stares out of the window all day. Rai replies that the earth, the sky, and the forest are all visible from the window and that is everything he needs. However, Rai then praises Frankenstein for making such delicious tea, making Frankenstein blush. The next day, Frankenstein goes to meet up with the Lord. At first, the Lord asks Frankenstein if he has been enjoying his time at Lucadonia and then questions Frankenstein if he knows the relationship between him and Rai. Apparently, the Lord thinks that Rai and himself are like brothers, making Frankenstein think that the Lord must be delusional. Afterward, the Lord informs Frankenstein about the blood pact and how he can live far longer if he manages to make one with Rai. Furthermore, the Lord tells him that Rai has a duty to protect the race and the very concept of nobility, and without him, the Lord is powerless. This makes Frankenstein frustrated that Rai is forced to live a lonely life because of such a silly reason and asks the Lord to remove that system. Lord laughs at him and lets Frankenstein know that he would have if he could. After the meeting, the Lord tells the other family leaders about how he suggested Frankenstein make a blood pact with Rai, and everyone is shocked after hearing about it. Even Jejital disagrees, but the Lord informs them that he can't help but wish for Rai's happiness. The next morning, Frankenstein asks Jejital to spar with him, but he declines the offer. At the same time, Uruk-hai arrives and asks Frankenstein to duel with him instead, and he accepts the offer, commenting how it is better to duel with someone who hates him. Later that day, the duel starts and both of them start attacking each other while Jejital and Rajak watch them from afar. Soon after, Uruk-hai starts overpowering Frankenstein and he decides to call Dark Spear in order to make the fight a little more balanced. Rajak tells Jejital that Frankenstein is currently restraining his powers to keep Dark Spear from going berserk. Meanwhile, Dark Spear doesn't help much either and Frankenstein still gets overwhelmed by Uruk-hai's powers. He then questions why a mere human is allowed to live with Rai when nobles like him are not allowed to even go near him. Uruk-hai then comments on how Rai is supposed to carry out his sublime duty by himself. Hearing this statement makes Frankenstein furious, and he lets go of all the restraints, which results in his body getting swallowed by Dark Spirit. Frankenstein manages to wound Uruk-hai's eye, but at this point, Jejital and Rajak interfere as the fight is now too much for Uruk-hai to handle. Frankenstein goes completely berserk, losing control of his body. Luckily, both Lord and Rai arrive at the spot, and Rai decides to fight Frankenstein's berserk mode. After using his blood field at maximum power, Rai manages to stop Frankenstein's dark spear with his bare hand and uses his blood to make Frankenstein return back to his senses. After some time, Frankenstein wakes up and finds himself in the mansion. He then goes to meet Rai and he asks Frankenstein to make him some tea. While preparing tea, Frankenstein remembers how Rai used immense power to help him out, which cost him his own health. Frankenstein then puts his own blood inside the tea, like a complete degenerate. Rai realizes this and asks Frankenstein if he really wants to make a blood pact with him. Frankenstein accepts and promises to stay by Rai's side forever. Back in the present, Jejital mentions that he wishes that he had stopped that pact from forming. Later, Frankenstein tells Jejital that Rai now has friends, school, classmates, and a family. These are things that cannot be traded for anything, which is why Rai wishes to stay there for longer. Before leaving, Jejital tells Regis that he will be taking his place as a family leader one day and wants Regis to stay with Frankenstein and learn as much as he can. Furthermore, he asks Sarah to look after Regis and wants both of them to do as their hearts desire. The next day, Rail appears near their school. Meanwhile, Shinwoo asks Rail to make paper planes during the free period, but he refuses, only to realize that both Sarah and Rai are making airplanes as well. On the other hand, the girls start to flock over M21 and the others again, and they ask the girls to head back to class. Just then, Rail uses mind control and all the nobles notice it. Rai is about to go and check it out, but Regis and Sarah reassure him that they will check it out for him. Before that happens, M21 along with Tao and Takeo confronts him. Rail mocks them for being smelly modified humans and starts off by stabbing M21 using his bare hands. Just when the fight is about to escalate, Regis and Sarah arrive and tell Rail to stop. His mood completely changes after seeing Sarah and mentions how this is his first time seeing Sarah since he proposed to her. Regis keeps on asking Rail the reason for his arrival, and he ends up getting annoyed, which results in Rail choking the life out of Regis. Sarah tells Regis to stop and he asks her to go home with him. She tells Rail that it is better to not make a commotion as Rajak will definitely hear about it and asks Rail to leave at once. He agrees to leave but tells Sarah that he doesn't want to make her sad. Afterward, they take M21 back home and he is put inside a healing tube. Tao and Takeo apologize for not being able to help, and Regis lets them know that it's not their fault as Rail is much stronger than them anyway. Sarah also elaborates on the proposal thing and tells everyone that he proposed to her a few years ago and got angry when she declined and ended up destroying their immediate vicinity. This resulted in his brother, Rajak, seizing and placing Rail in confinement for 10 years. Takeo then questions how Rail is this strong even though he looks the same age as Regis. He replies that Rail is twice his age, informing them that he himself is 199 years old. Later that day, Frankenstein runs some experiments on Tao and Takeo's bodies to make sure they are alright and tells them that M21 is expected to fully heal soon as well, thanks to his healing powers. Frankenstein then notices that both of them look gloomy, and they let Frankenstein know that both of them want to get stronger and ask Frankenstein for help. He lets them know that they might have to become research subjects, which they hate so much, for him to find the correct sort of powers. Takeo and Tao let Frankenstein know that the only reason they want power is to help their comrades, especially M21, just like how he stood up for them when they had nowhere to go. Frankenstein is happy to hear their reasoning and agrees to do some experiments and increase their power levels. On the other hand, Regis lets Sarah know that she is like his family and he won't ever let Rail get his filthy hands on her. She then remembers how Rail said something about not wanting to make her sad. This made her realize that Rail might be planning to eliminate Regis. She then pats Rail's head and tells him that there is nothing to worry about. Later that night, she goes to confront Rail on her own and Rai plans to go after her, but Frankenstein stops him, requesting to let him go instead. Rai then allows Frankenstein to break his seal, which is holding back his powers. After meeting up with Rail, he lets Sarah know that his feelings for her haven't changed even after being friend-zoned by her and doesn't want her to suffer by babysitting Regis or living with those humans. However, Sarah replies that cooking, friends, and school are new things for her and she happens to like them all, adding the fact that she wants to stay here instead of going away with Rail. Hearing this statement makes Rail even more furious. Just when he is about to attack Sarah, Frankenstein attacks him using his spikes. Frankenstein then asks Rail the reason for his appearance, but Rail heads straight for the elimination, just to realize that Frankenstein is faster than he thought. Frankenstein then releases his powers and lets Rail know that he won't let him go, considering how Rail has hurt one of his own, that being M21. The quantity of spikes increases, but Rail barely manages to dodge all of them. He then duplicates himself to attack Frankenstein, but ends up getting stabbed by a bunch of his spikes. Frankenstein then comments that he should be using his soul weapon instead of going easy. Sarah comments that he doesn't have a soul weapon as Rajak is the clan leader, but Frankenstein replies that he feels the presence of a soul weapon within him. Rail accepts his generous offer and takes out his soul weapon, calling it Grandia. One strike ends up gravely injuring Frankenstein, but this makes him happy, as his previous level of skills would have been too boring for Frankenstein. He then calls Dark Spear and the real battle begins. Frankenstein realizes that their battle might destroy the city, and Sarah lets Regis know that she will stop their fight. She takes out her soul weapon and stands beside Frankenstein, shocking Rail about the fact that Sarah is thinking of fighting him. Having no other choice, Rail takes out the official orders from the Lord that he brought and tells Sarah that the Lord has summoned her to Lucadonia. She agrees and returns back to Lucadonia, asking Frankenstein to take care of Regis. After returning home, Frankenstein informs Rai about everything and how this happened because Jejidal didn't inform the Lord about them. Later that night, Frankenstein asks Regis the reason behind his gloomy look, suggesting going after her. Regis replies that he can't do anything about it as it is Lord's orders. Frankenstein tells him to get ready as they all will be heading to Lucadonia soon. Meanwhile, Rosaria informs the Lord of Sarah's return and comments that the traitor will be soon captured as well. This reminds Raskrea of the time she was a child and saw Rai talking to her father, making her even more furious. Sarah is presented before the Lord and Raskrea asks if she encountered a mysterious noble while mingling with human. Before answering her question, Sarah asks about Jejidal and Raskrea replies that he is in a prison cell under suspicion of presenting a false report. After hearing about what the Lord has done with Jejidal, Sarah refuses to answer her question, which makes Raskrea use her powers to force Sarah to tell her the truth. Sarah does her best to keep quiet and she starts suffering because of it. Rail tries to help, but Rajak stops him from doing so. He tells the Lord that the only people he met were some modified humans and a blonde guy, who is far too powerful to be called a human. He further says that Regis and Sarah seem to have some sort of connection to him. At this point, Sarah starts suffering even more and Carias tells the Lord that Sarah can't handle this much of her powers. Raskrea eventually lets her go and orders Carias to put her in the prison cell, commenting on how refusing to answer the Lord's question is a serious crime. Furthermore, she asks Rajak to interrogate Jejidal and find out everything he knows. On the other hand, Regis along with Frankenstein and Rai are on their way to Lucadonia. Regis asks Frankenstein if those three will be alright at home as the Union can make their move at any time. Luckily, Frankenstein has already taken some measures and given them a new kind of pill he made. This pill is specifically made for boosting their powers and is safe as Frankenstein doesn't have any plans of swallowing them like Krantz did. The plane then experiences some turbulence and Frankenstein mentions that they have entered Lucadonian airspace. Apparently, there is no runway for the plane to land and they all will be jumping out. Meanwhile, all the family leaders are discussing the current situation and talk about how Sarah and Jejidal are being called traitors. Kay takes Jejidal's side and tells the others that he can never betray the Lord, and Carias adds that the same can be said for Sarah. Rosaria asks Rajak how the interrogation went and he replies that Jejidal didn't say anything new. Afterward, a guard arrives and informs everyone that a jet craft has crashed nearby and the family leaders ask him to assemble the knights. On the other hand, Rai and Frankenstein are walking in the jungle and Regis lets them know that they will enter the Forbidden Region if they keep on walking that way. They learn from Regis that the current lord has named that place a Forbidden Region and they ignore Regis's warning and head towards the direction, just to arrive at Rai's mansion. Frankenstein asks Regis to wait outside while they enter the mansion and Rai opens a humongous door using his powers. There, he finds the Lord's soul weapon, called Ragnarok. Regis notices the knights going in the mansion's direction and decides to subdue them before they can make any moves. The knight starts to grow in number and surround Regis, but luckily, Tao and the others arrive, taking care of the rest. After the fight, Frankenstein questions their arrival and Regis tells him that the three of them hid inside the plane and were pissing their pants while it went down. Rai then informs everyone that he and Frankenstein are being targeted by nobles as they suspect him of eliminating the previous lord. M21 also asks Rai to tell them his true identity and questions if he is a noblesse like Regis. Frankenstein replies and lets him know that noblesse doesn't refer to a group of nobles but a single entity who stands apart from all the noble. That noblesse is none other than Rai himself. After hearing his reply, Rai asks M21 if he still wants to assist a criminal and M21 lets him know that he is still indebted to him. Tao also mentions that they have made their own group called RK4, also known as Rai's Knights. Regis tells Rai that his grandfather protected him, which means he will follow in his footsteps and do the same. Hearing their answers makes Rai smile, and he remembers the one time when he had a meeting with the Lord. The Lord told Rai that forming connections with others like he did with Frankenstein is a good thing and hoped that his world would soon expand. The Lord also asks Rai if he has any interest in becoming the future Lord. Back to the present, Rai decides to visit the sanctuary, which is located in the Lord's castle. Ludis informs Raskrea that 3 modified humans have entered Lucadonia and Regis seems to be helping them out. Everyone is surprised to hear that Regis became a traitor and Raskrea concludes that the blonde man must be Rai's servant. She then tells everyone about forcing Jejital into eternal sleep. This shocks everyone and Kay mentions that all the leaders present were raised by Jejital, including the Lord himself. Eventually, she decides to give him one last chance and walks away, remembering the time of her childhood when Jejital used to be her teacher. Apparently, Raskrea used to work hard as according to her. She had to take the role of the next Lord and support her father. However, her dreams shattered when she heard the Lord ask Rai to become the next Lord. Back in the present, Raskrea goes to meet Jejital and asks him about the person he met when he left Lucadonia. Jejital finally admits that Rai was the person he met and kneels down, asking Raskrea to punish him as he has committed a grave crime. She then returns to the castle and announces that Jejital will be stripped of his position as clan leader and will be forced into eternal slumber. Additionally, she tells everyone that Rai is the one who has infiltrated the castle, asking the leaders to bring everyone including Regis to her. Regis and M21 are running towards the Lord's castle as their mission is to protect Frankenstein and Rai from any worthless trouble. While they are doing the group work, Tao and Takeo are backing them up from the shadows. Suddenly, Rail appears in front of them and at the same time, Rosaria appears in front of Sarah who is trying to run away in order to stop Jejital's forced eternal sleep. Rosaria attacks Sarah but Sarah attacks back, reminding Rosaria that she is a clan leader just like her. Meanwhile, Rail informs Regis that Sarah has been confined and Jejital has been sentenced to eternal sleep. Hearing this statement puts Regis in a state of shock and Rail attacks at the same time. Luckily, M21 is there to protect Regis and tells him to snap out. M21 tells Regis to go ahead while he fights Rail. Between their fight, a bullet grazes Rail's face which is fired by Takeo. Apparently, all 3 of them are working together to defeat Rail and tell Regis to do what he came here to do. Sarah also takes out her soul weapon, letting Rosaria know that she has no intention of following the Lord's orders. Rosaria also takes out her soul weapon to fight her. On the other hand, Carias and Rajak notice Regis running away and Carias decides to deal with him. Rail starts getting annoyed by Takeo's bullets and tells him to appear on the battlefield. Afterward, Tao gives M21 the signal and he starts mocking Rail for being a geezer who is older than the 3 of them combined. This makes Rail even more furious and this time, Takeo's bullet injures his shoulder and forces him into a trap laid out by Tao. Surprisingly, he still stands and this time, takes out his soul weapon to finish the fight. Frankenstein and Rai notice Rail's soul weapon and Rai asks Frankenstein to go and assist them. On the other hand, Regis comes face to face with Carias and suggests Regis leave Lucadonia as this is the best course of action for him. However, he refuses to do so, which makes Carias question if Jejital's betrayal was deliberate. Regis agrees to accept whatever punishment there might be. In the end, Carias offers a sparring session and agrees to assist Regis if his attack even manages to gaze him. Rail's soul weapon does a number on M21, forcing Tao and Takeo to enter the battlefield and assist him. However, their presence doesn't help as they are powerless in front of Rail. He starts to enjoy torturing the 3 of them and just then Rajak arrives. Rail panics and tries to hide his soul weapon from him. At the same time, Frankenstein appears and stabs Rail with countless spikes at once. Frankenstein tells Rail that he has been through countless battles, including one with their father, the previous Kersha clan leader. Rajak asks Rail to stand down as Frankenstein's level is too much for a Rizzler like him to handle. Rajak instantly takes out his soul weapon and so does Frankenstein. Regis doesn't give up even after failing countless times and stands back up, saying that he won't give up as many people risked their lives to get him to see Jejital. At the same time, Raskrea orders Ludis to bring Jejital to her. Sarah also loses her battle and Rosaria takes her to the Lord as well. The battle between Rajak and Frankenstein also begins and they both fight on equal terms. Tao compliments how good the battle is, making Rail attack them. Frankenstein comes in front of the attack, saving the 3 of them. This results in Rajak's attack hitting Frankenstein and Rajak scolds Rail for doing something so pathetic. He then injures himself, letting Frankenstein know that his attack wouldn't have hit him if Rail hadn't interfered. On the other hand, Regis finally gives up and has no strength left to fight Carias. He then lightly punches Carias, asking him to keep the promise he made. Sarah and Jejital are both present in front of the Lord and she questions Sarah if her intentions were to save Jejital. Raskrea then sentences her to eternal sleep as well, which comes as a surprise to all the other family leaders. Jejital starts speaking and tells the Lord that neither he nor Sarah has committed any crime. Rascrea comments on how he is still taking Rai's side and says that he will be forced to eternal sleep as well. Jegital disagrees, reminding her of the man who is with Rai all the time. He tells her that Frankenstein is the only human who can fight against a family leader on equal footing and is the only human who was acknowledged by the previous lord. Rail can't believe that his brother is struggling and offers to give him the power of his soul weapon. However, Rajak refuses, letting Rail know that their father must have had a reason to give him the soul weapon. He split the soul weapon in half and gave it to both his sons, doing something that is not normally permitted. Frankenstein adds the fact that their father is who taught him how to use his powers. Meanwhile, Jegital tells Rascrea that she is still not ready to be a lord who binds all the nobles together. He then tells the other leaders that the reason Rascrea hates Rai is because the previous lord offered to make him the lord instead of her. Jegital continues and tells Rascrea that if he has made any mistakes, it is to not correctly guide her into a noble worthy of being the lord. Hearing these insults makes all the other leaders ask Jegital to back off. After he is done yapping, Rascrea decides to take her revenge all at once and takes out her sword, ready to put Jegital to eternal sleep. She stands next to Jegital, and just when she is about to swing it, the castle door opens and Rai walks inside. Everyone is surprised to see Rai, and he asks Rascrea what she intends to do with Jegital and Sarah. She answers that it is obvious, and they will not be allowed to live any longer. Jegital apologizes to Rai for allowing all of this to happen, asking Rai to take care of everything. Rai walks forward, letting Rascrea know that he won't allow her to eliminate them. Just then, Kei appears in front of him and takes out his soul weapon to fight Rai. Kei attacks him with everything he's got, just to find out that it didn't even leave a scratch on him. Kei keeps on attacking him, but none of the attacks hit and Rai ends up throwing him away. Rosaria is the next one to challenge Rai, and he blocks her attacks easily as well. Ludis then uses his powers to trap Rai in a shield and tries to crush him but fails. Rai then uses mind control to make all the clan leaders kneel before him. This surprises Sarah, as the Lord is the only one who can control the minds of the clan leaders. Jegital informs her that even though the Lord is the higher power, a noblesse is a being of even greater power who can protect the Lord as well as punish them. Finally, Rascrea makes her move, telling all the family leaders that all of them combined are still not enough to defeat Rai. Rascrea uses her powers and Carius, along with Rajak and Frankenstein, notice this presence and head over to the Lord's castle at once. The fight between Rascrea and Rai begins, and Rai throws her away, making her crash into the wall. After she recovers, Rai advises her to not be so scared and to use all the power she possesses to fight him. She agrees and uses her blood field on Rai, but he easily takes care of it, making Lord shocked as to how her most powerful attack failed. He gets on the ground, thinking about how she lost to Rai once again. Just then, all the clan leaders come in front of Rascrea and plan to take Rai on their own. Rai comments that until Rascrea masters the proper use of the Lord's powers, she can never defeat him. Without wasting another second, all three leaders start attacking Rai at once, but they all prove to the worthless in front of his powers. Rascrea remembers Rai's words, and at the same time, Rai also uses his blood field. However, Rascrea picks up her sword once again and defends the family leaders from his blood field, succeeding in neutralizing the attack. But the Lord has already used more than enough power and starts feeling lightheaded. Rai starts to faint, but luckily, Frankenstein arrives and gives him a hand. Rai then walks towards Rascrea, and she is prepared to have her life taken away. To everyone's surprise, Rai takes out another Ragnarok, apart from the one Rascrea owns. Both the Ragnarok merge with each other and form a picture of the previous Lord, Rascrea's father. He tells Rascrea that this is a residual thought that he left within the Ragnarok. He then starts explaining the reason which led him to take his own life. This comes as a surprise to everyone, as they thought Rai was responsible for eliminating him. He starts off by letting everyone know that their race lives long lives and remains unchanged in order to lead their clans. This is completely different from how humans live, as they keep on striving to live longer and change themselves, which they call evolution. This then recalls when Frankenstein asked him to get rid of the rule that he doesn't like. And this came as a surprise to the previous Lord, as this simple thought never occurred to him, making him realize that they are not really free. He then shared this plan with the family leaders and told them that they had to entrust the future of Lucadonia to the new generation and go into eternal sleep themselves. A few of them agreed, and the Lord ordered Jegital to stay behind and watch over things. Everyone finds out that Jegital was aware of everything from the start. He replies that after the Lord's demise, everyone was in a state of confusion, including Rascrea, who was supposed to lead them as the new Lord. At that time, some of the nobles tried taking advantage of her weak state and spread a rumor of Rai being the traitor responsible for the Lord's demise. Slowly, Rascrea started to hate Rai, and the clan leaders started to agree with her as well. The reason he didn't tell anyone was because he thought it was in Lucadonia's best interest and planned to offer his life in atonement. Suddenly, Carius and Regis arrive, and he throws Regis towards the Lord. Regis tells the Lord that the sin of a clan leader falls upon the entire clan and asks to be executed the same way his grandfather will be. Carius vouches for Regis for being more noble than most of them and comments on how eliminating a promising future clan leader is not in their best interests. Rajak also agrees and says the same thing about Sarah as well. He then asks her to forgive Jejidal as well, asking Raskrea to hear the wishes of the clan leaders. All the clan leaders then ask her the same thing and she walks towards Jejidal, hugging and letting him know that she could never eliminate someone who used to love her that much. The previous lord then continues his speech and praises Raskrea for doing something he never could, which is being loved by all the family leaders there. He then apologizes for going into eternal sleep without informing her. He then says her goodbyes and goes away. A few days later, Regis pays M21 a visit in Rai's mansion and asks if his wounds healed. This results in the two of them fighting once again. At the same time, Frankenstein and Sarah also arrive and he seems glad to see that everyone recovered. Frankenstein then informs everyone that their preparation to return to Japan is completed and Regis along with Sarah also has permission to return until they reach adulthood. On the other hand, Raskrea goes to talk to Rai and asks what her father was like. This reminds him of the time when the previous lord asked him to become the next lord so he could assist Raskrea until she was at the age of becoming the lord. But he refused to do so and wished to assist the current lord for the time being. Back in the present, Rai tells Raskrea that his father was a proud, doting parent, which makes Raskrea crack up. Finally, everyone returns back to Japan and their normal daily life begins once again. This was all about our vampire and his trusted companion. Will the Union even stop coming after Rai and Frankenstein? Comment nobles below and let us know if you enjoyed watching the show. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.